So remind ourselves why we're here. Yeah. We're here to listen to Buddha's teachings, to see if there's something useful there that we can use in our life to develop our qualities so that finally we can be of benefit to others. This is the purpose of every word of the teachings, you know. So remind ourselves that's why we're doing it. And then that gives that makes the action of this listening actually that action. That's the motivation. So we can sing that little prayer that expresses that. The first two lines are expressing our reliance upon the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chen yen gi pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye dropa shog sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chen yen gi pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye dropa shog Sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chen yen gi pe sonam ki drola penchir sangye dropa shog. So any questions from your discussion? Anything come up? Yes.
After a long day at work, coming home, the house is a mess. Dinner still needs to be made. And as I walk through the door, the first feeling I have is one of resentment. I feel like I'm not getting any cooperation or help. I come home and the house is an absolute mess. And this is supposed to be my sanctuary, my healing place, and there is nothing happy going on inside me at this point. How do I find a remedy for this? Mm-hmm. Last night in my reading, it said that my resentment comes from fear, and I thought my resentment came from my anger.
Okay. So you live in the house with other people?
Yes.
And
yes.
That's all their house too?
Yes.
But they don't do the job. They don't take care of it. And you're the mum, basically.
Yes.
You're the mum and the wife.
Yes.
Yeah, right. It's not difficult. Well, you know, like with everything, really, it's really difficult. There are two. You got two options. No, you got two options to really make it your practice. One is to walk in the door and see this is your karmic appearance, and what an amazing opportunity to purify your impatience and your anger and your tiredness and your laziness and your past not helping others. You know, this is the manifestation of your, in past lives you weren't cooperating with others, and there they left all the junk for you, and now there's all the junk. That's the way to see it from the point of view of karma, and you do it with a happy mind. Or you have a discussion and you kind of make a decision between you all. You have a meeting and you decide you'd like to share this job, and you work it all out. And then you do your bit, and then you let them do theirs. And if they don't, you leave it. You see, the trouble is, this is our kind of sentimental kindness, especially it's the mum's one. In the end, it's easier to do it yourself, you know, but then the resentment comes, you see. So you either do it with a really happy mind and you make it your practice. It's like if someone, you know, that's the whole practice. We haven't even begun to talk about that yet. He mentioned it today, actually. But that's the practice of transforming problems into happiness. It's you using every miserable thing in your life as a great opportunity to help you develop your qualities. And it really is it's a good one. It's like if you're, you know, it's what we do every day in ordinary life. You know, Lance Armstrong loves the high mountains. He doesn't get resentful when he sees the high mountain. He sees it as a challenge, and the higher, the more difficult, the better, because that makes him become a better cyclist. So problems, the things that we don't want, the messy house, are a perfect opportunity for us to purify attachment and to purify anger. But that's up to what we can take, what we can bear. You understand? So that's a huge practice, just itself. The other one, because it's also for the benefit of others, do you think it's reasonable that the others do it as well? Do you think it is reasonable?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and has there been an agreement in the past? That they do it too?
We've had a family meeting,
but they share the job?
But it's never come around. And
what do you mean it's never come around? No, they haven't agreed from their side that they would share it.
Right.
They've never?
No.
Well, okay, then you can't make it, you can't force them. Even though it is correct that they do it, then maybe you decide, okay, I mean, you see, it's either way, it's practice for you. Because the point is, if you can all agree that they all do it, and they probably won't, so you're still going to have the resentment, so you're still going to have to practice with it. And that means really, really with a happy mind, leave it, let the dishes pile up onto the floor. You see, but you see, the thing is, that's where we hurt ourselves. It's easier for us to do it, and then you're setting yourself up again for them to continue not to do it. So either way, it becomes like a game, and you get into trouble there. Your mind starts getting angry and upset. Or you just learn to do you decide whatever it is you're going to do, and you do it with a happy mind. So this is the trouble with mothers. Mothers end up doing it, and even though the kids are supposed to do it, and maybe hubby's supposed to do it too, and they end up not, they end up just doing it anyway. And then you're setting yourself up for disappointment because you're colluding with their laziness. So if you really do agree that you're all going to share the job, then it is kind to them to not do it. But then you've got to accept the dirty dishes and kind of crack jokes and, oops, where's my mug? And 5 layers of dishes, there it is. But don't do them, and eventually they'll do their job. But if you start, getting angry and making snide remarks, then that's not helpful either. So whatever way you take it, it's practice. Isn't it? It's not easy. That's what you get for living with people. That's why I prefer to live on my own. That's why I prefer not to have. That's why I prefer not to have, boards of directors on the prison project that we've got. I have some, but they all agree with me. That's why I decide I don't want to have a husband and children, because you set yourself up for problems. I'd rather just do my own thing. So that's your life. This is your choice, and this is what comes along with wanting security and love and all the rest. This is the downside of it. Do you see? This is the one. I mean, I remember, for me, I'm so independent and so, well, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter, neurotic, whatever you like. But I know when I was into relationships, I wanted the pleasure, guaranteed. I wanted fun and pleasure, and I wanted love, But I realised definitely I didn't want the other stuff. I didn't want the security. I didn't want the romance. I didn't want the house and all that nonsense. So for me, it was very easy to give it up because I knew I didn't want all the other stuff. And the bit of pleasure that came along with the dramas wasn't worth it. So that was why I'm a nun. Truly, truly. But this is the downside of what, the beginning, the romance, the wonderful, the finding a soulmate or the perfection, the house, putting it together, the kids. Now this is this one. So a whole new phase of practice begins.
Working on controlling my mouth and
That's a good
myself.
start.
And
that's a good start.
I don't know. That's just where I'm at.
That's good. And I think probably you work all day as well, right? You go on a job. Okay, then I think it's very reasonable. You just decide. You just lay it out, not with resentment, not with anger, not with a sort of, kind of snide around, just very clean, very straight. We all work about something a number of hours. I really think it's appropriate. Really choose your words. Even email people. Don't speak it. I think we all need to share this job. I can't handle it all. I'm going to do this much. I promise. I'll do this much. But I'd really be grateful if all you guys could do this much. Could you just let me know that you agree and call it a family meeting, whatever you like, and then get them to agree, and then you just accept it. But you've got to accept it. And don't whine, and don't go do your job again. Let them be. And they'll see the dirty dishes eventually. And as soon as you start pointing fingers at people, they feel guilty and resentful, and then they won't do it. But if you just let it be and act as if it's not even like that, eventually they'll see it themselves. They'll feel ashamed, and they'll want to do it. But that's a practice too. So you've got to decide which practice is best. You see? It's not an easy one. Either way, it's not easy. And whatever choice you make, you've got to decide it's your choice. Whatever it is you decide you're going to do, if you're going to decide to do it, you really do it with a happy mind. With resentment, just makes everybody miserable, and not to mention yourself. Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not easy, but no choice. Someone else? Questions came up? Yeah. Mike over here.
I wondered if you would spend a few minutes on the concept of ego grasping. I'm confused on exactly what that is.
No, exactly. I was going to go into it in more depth, but now that you've asked, why not? Why not now? Okay, sure, I will. But before I do that, are there any more questions? Because that will take quite a while. Any more questions? Yeah, here.
This is actually from yesterday. It's about the fish.
Oh, yes.
Does eating the fish that the fisherman killed incur
Okay, that's
negative
another
karma
interesting
too?
discussion. Okay, we'll talk about that too. Well, let me talk about that one, then we'll do the ego grasping one. Okay. So this is when you want to get very clinical about it, and like anything, you need to. This is where you've got to be precise, right? Like we are with making microphones and making cakes. You've got to be precise. So if we're looking at an action, as we said, we look at an action, you label the action, and then you're looking to see if those four parts are there: the intention, the object, the action, result, right? Don't you? To decide what is an action of killing. And then in order to see whether it's a negative action for you, we look at the motivation that you created, don't we? And then there are underneath that intention, there's motivation, the most important, but there are two other factors, and I mentioned them briefly before, in order to decide the strength of the karma you create when you kill that fish, right? First there's the motivation, and the motivation in the case of killing the fish is attachment, isn't it? Attachment to the whole scenario. And then, of course, it's a far heavier action, in this case of negative one, if you have a habit, if you're a habitual. So that fisherman, being a habitual killer, killed hundreds of thousands of fish, you know, was a much heavier action because it's a habit. So the same with a good action. If it's deeply habitual for you to be generous, then your karma of generosity is far more powerful than someone else's, because the habit is there. So good or bad karma, same thing. But the other one is, and as I mentioned this too, it's in terms of killing, if you do it in a particularly savage or horrible way, like that bloke who stabbed through the heart of the crab and then cut it into four, that's quite intense, isn't it? You know, than say just accidentally, you know, washing that, maybe, well, drowning probably for an ant isn't so pleasant, sort of. But if there's, you know, if your motivation isn't well, if your motivation, depending on your motivation, but the way you do it, all I'm getting at. So if if you're sadistic in the way you kill somebody, it's much heavier karma that way. And there are many other factors too, you know. So okay, let's look at eating fish. So another aspect, remember I said about the action, in general, again, whether it's positive or negative action, the closer you are to the actual action, the stronger the karma. So if, say, you know, you're about 20 people down in an action, you know, it weakens as it goes along. It's weaker and weaker and weaker. Let's say someone offers $1 million to something, and you add 5 cents to it. Well, that's generosity, but it's not as strong as a person, you know. You understand? So killing, strictly speaking, it's the same. The further away you are in the killing action, then the weaker the karma. There's still karma. Everything we do, there's still a relationship. Everything's interdependent. So there you are. If, let's say, you kill the fish yourself, and then you eat the fish, that's much heavier in general, okay? In general, much heavier an action than if you're even the 4th person down. And then even if not to mention if you just buy the fish in the supermarket. In terms of its being an action of killing, it's a much weaker action. And then you can't even call it an action of killing. Let's look. Did you have an intention to kill? Did you? Was there a live fish there? Did you do the action of killing it? Did it die before you? It's about the only one. So just from that just sort of really clinical point of view, you would say, in general, eating meat, eating the body of a dead animal is not the same as killing an animal. It just isn't. You just have to look at it. Now, that's an emotional topic for us. We say, but, we start all the buts. So yes, it's true. You are, we are supporting the industry of killing fish if we eat fish. You can say that. But then still so many other things to factor in there, you know. One is, for example, we don't think this in the West. The theory that if we all stopped eating fish, there would be no fish, there'd be no fish killed, sounds like a good theory. It's true. And this is one of the reasons we try to stop doing things, because you don't want to support you don't want to support the something or other of Tibet, so you don't buy Chinese goods. Now that's so you don't eat fish because you don't want to support the fish industry. Now let's look at that in realistic terms. In reality, what happens? It probably makes not the fraction of difference to the Chinese, to the Chinese industry. Of course, if 10 million people do it, like the boycotting, all the what was that? I remember that famous one in California, wasn't it? The grapes and the lettuces and different things. If it's true, if enough people can all do together, then it will have an impact. But then again, you see, that's just mainly that's an action that's an external action that does bring a result externally. But here we're also talking about individual karma. So the people who didn't eat those grapes, you could probably, or didn't support the grape, whatever it was, you could say probably a lot of them did it out of a lot of anger. So karmically they created negative karma. They weren't being so kind. So because in the West we're obsessive, we only care about the external. Do you see? It's all a political action. Or it's a principle. Well, it depends on your mind. Everything, the karma you create, depends on what is happening in your mind. So you can say that, you can say war is bad. Sure, and you look at the pictures of Iraq and you see the suffering of the American soldiers, you see the suffering of the poor Iraqis, and you see all the insurgents now, you see all the drama of war. It's obvious to see there's human suffering there. And so, it seems a fairly good thing. You can't say it's a good thing. Look at the suffering. It's too intense. But then you have to look at each individual person that's involved to see what the karma is that people are creating. A person could, be a soldier with a really pure motivation to defend people. Truly, even when they're killing, they're doing it to defend people. There's a pure motivation in their heart. You can have another person who doesn't kill anybody, but who's full of anger and rage, who creates heavier negative karma. So it really is so many variations, so many factors you're trying to look at, isn't it? So if the main goal is to, okay, forget that. Each individual person has to look at the karma they're creating. So that it is true. You can say, it's not wrong to say, if you didn't eat fish, then if everybody didn't eat fish, then there'd be no fishing. It's true. But then in realistic terms, you see, that doesn't factor in another crucial thing, which we don't think about, and that's the karma of the fish. So as long as there are fish that have got karma to be killed, and there are fishermen who've got the karma to kill, they'll get killed, and there'll be a glut of fish probably. No fishing eater. There'll be a problem because there won't be any people buying the fish, but there'll probably be a glut of dead fish. So even your action of not eating fish might not make a fraction of difference to the killing of fish. But then if that's your only reason for doing it, then you might as well go back to eating fish. But if the reason to do it is because you don't want to be associated with killing and you don't want to have any karmic print in your mind about killing, then it's best not to eat fish. So there's many ways of looking at it. Are you seeing my point? Does that answer your questions, though? Food for thought, isn't it? That's right, exactly. Yep. Because there are... Okay, give them the mic, would you? Just hand it out. Just pass it over. Why do we assume... Bit closer to the mic. Bit closer, darling. Just put your mouth closer to the mic. It's on. It's not on. Okay, go. Just speak.
How do we know the fish have karma to be killed or deer that are shot have karma to be killed? What do you think?
Okay, if a deer has been shot, is a deer a sentient being? Has a mind? And the simple principle of karma is that whatever happens to you is the result of an action you did. Therefore, it has the karma to be killed. That's the proof. So, I mean, in general, it doesn't mean every fish has the karma to die. Some fish live till a ripe old age. It's true, isn't it? But, I'm just saying in general, the main reason the fish dies, their karma to be killed. Otherwise the fish would all just not go to that net. That's an interdependent, it's crucial part of the scenario, and we never factor that in the West, and we even forget it as Buddhists, But there's nothing that ever happens to any sentient being that they haven't created the cause to have happen. It's very simple. The main cause of the September 11 thing, you could say, is the karma of those people from having harmed in the past those pilots. They died. There's nothing, and again, like I said about, who was it? Not you, maybe it was you. There's nothing possible that could be good that you could experience. It's not possible that you'd have even one grain of rice to eat if you hadn't created generosity in the past. So we can deduce from the fact that you're still living and you've got a healthy body and you're sitting here with some leisure, presuming you've got some money in the bank and got a job and everything, that's because of your morality, your patience, your generosity. It's not possible you'd be having any of this if you hadn't created that. It's not possible to have even a second of suffering if you haven't created the cause for it. In other words, that's the simple point that Buddha's making. The main cause of everything that happens is the past action that sentient being does. Yeah. And of course, with our usual view, we don't like to think this way, because as soon as we think someone created the cause to have something happen to them, we think they're not an innocent victim, and the only people we like to have compassion for are what we think are innocent victims. You see what I'm saying? So that's why karma is, we've got to really adjust our minds to think about it. Someone else? Yeah.
Lack of action causes karma.
Say that again.
Lack of action causes karma.
Lack. Yeah.
Well,
Give the man the mic. Just pass it over.
failure to save a drowning person.
Okay, just let's discuss it. Just sit down. It's okay. Stay there. It goes over. Just pull it. Plenty of cord. Just sit there. Go on.
Yeah. Can lack of action cause karma?
Yeah, lack of action can be an action. Action means something that your mind does. So what's the mind doing? It's a question of what the mind's doing. What is the mind doing in this particular scenario?
It's choosing to not react to something.
Okay, so
where
it
has
sees a
choice.
person in suffering and doesn't reach out to help.
Right.
So we have to look into the mind of that person to see what the intention is, and then what's the motivation for the intention. So we can probably deduce from that the person, we're caught up in our own neuroses, caught up in our own needs, and they're probably caught up in their own comfort. And they see another human being because they're a stranger, and they have to be very strongly caught up in their own needs, don't they? Very self-centered. To see a human being drowning and you don't try to do anything. Yeah, for sure, that's a very strong action, isn't it? Unbelievably strong action. Of course it is. But you can't say that about every person because you can't see their mind. We've got to see the mind. We've got to know what's in the mind to say. Because the person might be blind, sitting there smiling in the sun and they can't see a thing. So we can't say. So let's talk about this ego grasping. So remember, basically Buddha's saying we've got this mind, this continuity of mental moments that's not physical, that's not created by anybody else, doesn't come from the mother, father, all the rest. It's our own, and whatever's in it is our own. Whatever's in it is the result of what we have said and done and thought before. Whatever it doesn't necessarily. This is just it. This is our experiences, our mind, our propensities, our thoughts, our feelings. So this mind, Buddha says, has this potential to be totally perfect, totally fully developed. And a simple way to say that is fully developed in the positive qualities and completely free of the negative. Fully developed in the positive and completely free of the negative. So psychologically, as I've been saying, it's quite a radical statement. We all accept, if we look at, we can do some market research and check in our own experiences, we'll all probably agree that kindness and joy and patience and generosity are nice qualities and they make us happy. And we would all agree that anger and jealousy and depression are unhappy qualities and make us miserable. We would agree with this. And so, but in the West, we give equal status to these and we say that's what a person is, and you just do your best to kind of juggle them and balance them and kind of keep them under control. Not too much kindness and not too much jealous, I mean, if you're over the top kind and want to give all your money to everybody in the world, people think you're a bit odd. And if you're really, really jealous, people know you're a bit suffering. So as long as we keep them under control and a fairly reasonable, that's what we think mostly in the West is a fairly good person. Well, Buddha says he's far more radical. Simply speaking, he is saying that mind in its nature, finally, is in the nature of the good qualities, and the negative ones are pollution. They're additives, and they don't belong, and that we can get rid of them. So the simple reason we want to get rid of them, and the simple reason we want to develop our mind to perfection, this term Buddhahood, enlightenment, simply using it to refer to the fully developed mind. The simple reason we would want to remove the negative qualities from our mind is because they cause us suffering and cause us to harm others. So if you just look at the world, you can see it's a pretty suffering place. So this is Buddha's solution to it. Get rid of all the delusions in your own mind and then develop all the positive qualities, and then you're going to be not only happy yourself, but you're qualified to help others be happy. That's the job. This is the job of becoming a Buddha. It's the essential job of being a Buddhist. This is what you're trying to do. So if it's true that the negative qualities are not innate to us, and if it's true they cause us suffering, and if it's true we don't want to suffer, then it's very reasonable that we would want to investigate our mind and find out about these negative qualities and see if Buddha's right about it, verify it for ourselves, and then slowly do the job of removing them. It's practical and reasonable. So the Buddha would, one term he uses for these negative states of mind, for the neuroses, is this word, delusions, okay? Delusions. So we've discussed, a few already. We've talked about attachment, and we've hardly begun, really. We've got to go into it yet. We've mentioned attachment and anger. But we have talked broadly about the characteristic, haven't we? Some of the main characteristics of these delusions, and the one that we've been discussing that we really have to look into, but which is not very evident to us, is this quality, this characteristic of these negative states of mind that is this capacity they have for lying, for distortion, for not being accurate. In other words, simply speaking, when attachment is prevalent in your mind, when you look at a chocolate cake, the cake will appear unbelievably delicious, like dramatically delicious. What will be in your mind will be this kind of anxiety, this neediness, this kind of emotional hunger to get the cake. Because the other lie that attachment talks about, the other lie that attachment tells us, besides making the cake look more delicious to us, is that attachment is convinced that when I get it, I'll get happy. That's why we hanker after it and then, greedily get it. So the general function of the deluded states of mind is to see things that aren't there, to exaggerate what's there, to embellish what's there. So that's the states of mind are distorted. They're liars. In themselves, they're simply misconceptions. And they've got which have all these emotional components, this emotional packaging around them. So if you want to really look into get into your mind through meditation, you get to the bare bones of what attachment is. You will see it is a very elaborate series of thoughts. It's basically a story, a conception, a viewpoint that our mind takes. But because we've had it for eons, Buddha says, it's got all this emotional packaging around it. So it has the emotional energy of neediness, the emotional energy of possessiveness, the emotional energy of controlling, of fear of not getting, that causes all the manipulation and the expectation. All this is the drama around the bare bones of this series of conceptual thoughts, this viewpoint that says that cake is more delicious than it really is, that says that when I get cake it'll make me happy, and all of this. So, aversion is the response when attachment is thwarted. And aversion is another viewpoint. And that's the viewpoint that thing, how dare that happen? That thing is exactly the opposite to what I want. And so it looks really ugly, and then you want to make it go away. And so really, violent aversion is called anger, that wants to harm that person, smash that thing, that sees the cake. If it's just in the mind, when you see the cake will look disgusting to you, and you'll go, oh, revolting, and you'd vomit if you ate it, and you want to push it away. That state of mind is aversion, and it's the exact opposite of attachment, and it's the flip side of attachment, and it's the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So they're utterly linked. So these are the two main delusions that we go like a maniac between 1,000 times a day. The bottom line one, effectively for day-to-day life, the default mode for day-to-day life, is the one of attachment. It's an assumption. It's so deep in the bones of our being, it's virtually at the level of assumption. And the assumption is desperately to get what I want every split second, through the senses, through the ears, through the eyes, the right feeling, the right sound, the right smell, the right reputation, the right look from a person, the right taste, the right everything. It's this obsessive neediness to get that all the time. The split second that it doesn't, aversion arises. So we're going between these two. So generally speaking, aversion is what you get when you don't get what you want, and attachment is what you get when is the attempt to get what you want. And then what we think in the world that happiness is what when attachment gets what it wants. And we think what suffering is when aversion gets what it doesn't want. And that's the world. That's the life. And we spend all our life between these two, desperately trying to avoid the ugly things, and then devastated when we get them, and then blame and kill and lie and steal and do all the rest because of that. And then frantically trying to get the nice things. This is samsara, Buddha says. This is the day-to-day job of samsara. And this is what we're utterly caught up in. This is what we call life. So, beneath this, there's another delusion. That, effectively from the point of view of day-to-day life, and using the packaging of the Four Noble Truths, this is the way to talk. Effectively, attachment is the main cause of our suffering from day to day. But if we want to go deeper and we want to look at what is the main cause of suffering in the first place, what is even the cause of even being born as a human with attachment in the first place, what is even the cause of anything at all in the first place, not anything, not the main cause like God or something, but the cause of any suffering at all, why we're even born into a situation where we have that suffering. What's the cause of that in the mind? Well, that's another delusion, this one that's even deeper than those two, that's called the root delusion, often simply known in Tibetan as ignorance, ma rigpa, okay, unawareness. So it's this primordial unawareness, a primordial ignorance of actually, finally, how things really exist. So attachment is they're all ignorances in the sense, they're all ignorant, they're mistaken states of mind. So attachment is ignorant insofar as it really believes that cake will make me happy. It's not true, it's ignorance. It isn't like that, Buddha says. And that aversion is ignorance in the sense that it really believes that that mean person is the cause of all my suffering. Well, it's just not true. So the deepest one, and they actually call it ignorance, is simply called ignorance, mat rigpa, or known colloquially when it comes to self as ego grasping. So what it is mistaking, so attachment misconceives the cake insofar as it sees it as more delicious than it really is. Aversion misconceives the person insofar as it sees the person as uglier than they really are. So they're distortions. So what, they embellish, they exaggerate. So, or as Lama Zopa puts it, they decorate on top of what is already there, qualities that just don't exist there. This is a concept we can understand if we think carefully about it. You analyze, that beautiful new purse that you think is just so gorgeous. But the person next to you is a person who left it there because they thought it was so ugly. They didn't buy it. It was so ugly. So when they see it, they go, ugh. When you see it, you go, oh, wow, divine. So beauty, as our mother told us, is in the eye of a beholder. It's a very profound statement. This is exactly what Buddha's saying. But we hear that, and we even know that our friend thinks our purse is ugly. But we don't get the teaching from this. It's enough to make us realize emptiness if we really got it. Because it's in the mind. That purse to you looks beautiful. That purse to someone else looks ugly. Some people really like George Bush. And I mean, he's got many good qualities. But if you don't like George Bush, you don't want to see a good quality. You don't even want to go there because you just want to believe in your view that he's this mean, ugly person. It's obviously really simplistic and it's obviously wrong. I mean, I really admire George Bush in many ways. He doesn't like killing fetuses. I think that's a marvellous thing. Okay, I might disagree with him about death row, but that's another discussion. I admire him for that. He's got many good qualities. He's a good moral man in many ways. How dare we criticize him, So we've got to be accurate, that's all. Be accurate. You know yourself when someone really doesn't like you. You know how unfair it is. You know they're not seeing the real person that you are. They're just seeing a certain part of you, and so they hate you. You know how mean it is and how cruel it feels. Well, that's how delusions are. Delusions exaggerate. They take one or two aspects of the object and then they paint the whole of the object with that brush. That's how delusions work. We can see it. We see it every day, but we so take it for granted we never question it. They exaggerate. They distort. They embellish. They're extreme. They're not accurate. They're misconceptions. And they're the cause of suffering. So the root one, what does it embellish? What does it exaggerate? It exaggerates, so you could say that attachment exaggerates delicious cakeness. Ignorance exaggerates cakeness. Ignorance sees something out there from its own side. Ignorance sees something out there that's inherent in it, that gives it its delicious cakeness. Now, this is something that our minds are doing all the time without ceasing. This is ignorance. This is the root of samsara, Buddha says. And this, and then philosophically speaking, this is what's interesting. Philosophically speaking, back at the time of the Hindus, when the Buddha popped up, his discussion was exactly at the philosophical level about this point. Because the Hindu view says there is Atma, there is a self. So the equivalent of that is there is a soul. The Christian teachings, there is a soul. So Buddha is asserting there is no self. So if he were discussing it with Christians, he would say there is no soul. Now, he's not being a kind of nihilistic person who says there's just a big gaping hole there. It's not that. It's more that he's talking about the way that whatever it is exists. So right now, when we hear Buddha talking, he talks about the two extreme views in the mind, okay? And so one of those views is that there is a cake out there from its own side. These words are too abstract for us because it's so pervasive in our mind we don't notice that we do it. That there is, he says that this one extreme view is that posits that there is a cake out there from its own side. There is an inherent cake. Now that is what he calls the eternalistic view, and that's the view that is the view of the Hindus, that there is an Atma. That's the view of the Christians, that there is a self-existent God. There is a self-existent soul. So, Buddha's arguing with that. So whether it's a self-existent cake or self-existent soul, the principle is the same. But this is what he is saying. This view of self-existence, we've now reified it to the point of its being religious. Then you've got the other extreme view, which is what he would call the nihilistic view, that there is nothing. So you could even say that the Western materialist view is that one, which is why we all so depressed and go kill ourselves all the time. There's nothing, Life's worthless. There's nothing. There's no meaning. That's the nihilistic view. So he says our minds go crazily between these two extremes just because we have this ignorance. So as soon as we hear the Buddha says there's no self, we immediately run to the wrong view called nihilism, and we chuck the baby out with the bathwater, basically, and we say, oh, well, there's nothing. It's all empty. There's no meaning. Doesn't matter. There's nothing anyway. That's how we hear it. And then as soon as we hear him say things do exist as a dependent arising, we grasp onto it and go, oh, thank goodness there is something after all. So as soon as we hear Buddha's view, which is that there's nothing from its own side, but there is something existing, he says the two truths. He says in reality, ultimately, you can find nothing from the side of the cup, the self, the whatever it might be, the cake. It doesn't matter what the object is. The discussion is identical. From the side of an object, there is nothing that gives it its thingness, he says. But he says that doesn't mean there is no thing. So it sounds like a bit tricky, doesn't it? Like he's trying to be clever or something. So this is what we have to do, think about. These monks spend 25 years, and Geshe-la, here today, spending 25, 30 years studying this stuff, and then 25, 30 years meditating and teaching on it, to begin to even comprehend it experientially. So it's to get the two truths together, get to see that they're not contradictory. So Lama Tsongkhapa, our lineage, the lineage Lama, the 14th century Lama of the tradition of our teachings in Tibet, he's really into this one of dependent arising and emptiness. As Lama Yeshe puts it, paraphrasing Lama Tsongkhapa, he says, dependent arising is the king of logics that proves emptiness. So then, this emptiness business, okay, it's just the shorthand, that's all. It's shorthand. So what does it mean? Let's just demystify the words. The word empty, it's very simple, isn't it? It just means lacking, lack, absent, doesn't it? Not there. You know, let's say my cup, I'd say it's empty of tea. Well, my cup lacks tea. It's a very simple word. It's not a religious word in its own nature. It doesn't have some special secret meaning. In that simple sense, insofar as the word itself, it simply means lack or absent. So, you know, speaking in shorthand, Buddha says, the cup is empty of existing from its own side, he'll say. He'll say, the cup is empty of existing from its own side. The cup is empty. He'll even say that. Emptiness. In fact, even he'll say emptiness is the ultimate nature of the cup. This is the way he talks. So clearly we've got to get our heads around how he talks. It's a kind of very quaint, unusual way of talking. We don't talk like this. We wouldn't even say, you know, let's say that cup is not, let's say, this is true, isn't it, that this cup is not red, and assuming you're not colourblind. We can see it's mainly yellow. Let's just say it's mainly yellow. So you can see this cup is not red, can't you? Now we'd simply say, you're right, it's not red. We could say it lacks redness. We'd understand that, wouldn't we? We could even say it's empty of being red. And once we get the understanding, we know what that means. It just means it's not red. It's empty of it's empty of redness. It's a really quaint way to say it, but we understand. Well, Buddha says that everything that exists, cup, microphone, toilet, good, bad, Buddha, enlightenment, hell realms, whatever you posit as existing. And indeed, you've got to be very careful about doing that, because he says right now we're mostly living in la-la land about that which exists, and they don't even exist. We're positing lots of things that don't exist. So in other words, inherent, existing from its own side, delicious cake doesn't exist. It's a projection. It's a viewpoint. It's a fantasy. So we have to be very clear in positing, first of all, what does exist, and then we have to discuss how they exist. This is the bottom line, basically, for the Buddha, what we're trying to do. So ultimately, finally, Buddha says, everything is empty of existing from its own side. Everything lacks an inherent thingness. He says, you see, this is what it's puzzling, because we're wondering, why is he telling us that? It's just sort of like double trouble, you know. We don't even know why he's telling us that. And he says he's telling us that because he's saying, listen, honey, the ignorance in your mind thinks there is a self-existent cup. Now, who thought that? No one ever taught me that. I don't think I think that. I've never thought those words in my entire life. Oh, there's a self-existent cup. You see my point here? So it's a bit puzzling to hear the Buddha says it lacks that when you didn't even think you thought it did have it. So we've got to first get your head around what he is saying that ignorance is doing. So when we analyse attachment, we maybe haven't thought about it this way, but we can recognise it, can't we? We know that when we see something as fantastic, you kind of exaggerate its deliciousness. You don't like to think that, and this is the point, check. You can see now, if you think carefully, that your attachment distorts the deliciousness of the cake, and that's what causes you to hanker after it and get it into your mouth, because you're convinced that when you get it, you'll get happy. We can recognise that process, can't we? But it's been so intuitive for us. We've never really labelled it this way. We didn't learn that at school. You know, we just thought it meant liking chocolate cake. Or maybe we'd call it being greedy. You know, we'd give it that name. But we didn't analyse it further. Well, as I said, this is Buddha's expertise, deconstructing the way the mind works. You know, it's his job. This is because it's his method for getting happy. So when we hear that, we can see that our mind does it. But to hear that the ignorance in you don't even know it had a name. We don't give it this name. There's no such name in Western psychology, you know. There is the word ignorance, but not this one. We didn't ever realise that the ignorance in our mind is believing that delicious cake exists out there from its own side, inherently, in and of itself. But if we hear that and then we analyse how that works, we can even see that we do that. So let me explain. When we see how we do project deliciousness onto the cake, we can see we do that. But look at this one. This is the ignorance one. We don't think until now that we've done that. We've always just thought the cake is delicious. isn't it? We don't say, oh yes, I'm seeing the cake is delicious. We don't say that, do we? We say the cake is delicious, don't we? We say that, don't we? We say he is divine. We don't say, oh, I met this gorgeous guy today and he appears to my mind as quite handsome. What do you think? Oh, you see him as ugly. That's fascinating. Well, due to past karma, I must have very virtuous karma with him because he appears very beautiful to me. We don't talk like that, do we? We go, he is gorgeous, and we kind of go... In other words, we believe he is gorgeous from his own side. So that's how ignorance works. You get my point here? Are you hearing me, people? We know, we see we do this, but we don't think we're doing anything. We say, but George Bush is horrible, or George Bush is nice. We don't argue about it reasonably. A racist won't say, well, I really do think black people aren't such good people because they do this and this. What do you think? No way. That's the whole point about ignorance. It's narrow-minded, it's fundamentalist, and it believes it's right. Well, check your own life, babe. You don't have to be a racist to be fundamentalist. You don't have to be a fundamentalist Christian to be fundamentalist. It just means this tight view that believes that what you see is how the thing exists. That's how ignorance functions. That's all. We do it all the time. That's how ignorance functions. And the words Buddha gives to that process is, oh, you're seeing that as existing from its own side. It's quite odd phrase. We don't think that, but we can see we do it all the time. That's just the words he gives to that thing of saying, but he is handsome. And everybody else who thinks he isn't, you think they're stupid, right? If you're a fundamentalist Christian, everybody who isn't is wrong, isn't it? If you're a racist, everybody who thinks black people are nice is a very peculiar person. You won't talk to them. So fundamentalism is very concrete, very fixed, believes in its own picture, doesn't think it's a picture, thinks it's objective truth. That's fundamentalism. And Buddha says, you know what, baby? All of us do it all the time. And the one we grasp at is everything. We see everything in that way. We see microphones as inherently microphone. We see cake as inherently cake. And this is where it's difficult, because the bottom line for us is the world consists of cakes and microphones and black people and Christians. So then what we try to do is have an equal view about them and think, well, be reasonable, you know. There is a microphone, but don't be attached to it. That's good. That's a good step. But we've got to go further and say that even microphone is a projection. And this is where it gets difficult. Even person is a projection. Even good is a projection. Even bad is a projection. Even hell is a view. Everything is view, Buddha says. And this is where it gets tricky. And this is where it's hard to understand. So what Buddha's saying, you won't, if you start to analyze, which is the job, what we have to do, you will not find one atom of delicious chocolate cake in the chocolate cake. You won't even find chocolate cake in the chocolate cake. So everything is an opinion. It's a viewpoint. Chocolate cake is simply a viewpoint. It's a story our mind has made up over eons of time. And we've all agreed. There's a convention. See, this is the ultimate talking now. It's you know, our mind has labelled it. We've come together and put the eggs and the chocolate, and then we've labelled it chocolate cake. So then we start to believe in chocolate cake. And then we put chocolate cake out there as existing from its own side, forgetting that we created it. We invented it. Our mind made it up. And Buddha's saying that is the ultimate, the final way that everything exists. Ultimately, from the side of the cake, you can't find anything that possesses cake nature, self nature, microphone nature. But that doesn't mean there's no microphone. And it doesn't mean there's no self. And it doesn't mean there's no cake. And it doesn't mean there's no whatever it is we're positing. So he says, this instinctively held deep ignorance is the root wrong view, and it is the literal cause of having a life, of being born, of having any kind of experience at all. So we have to uproot this one, Buddha says. That's when we realize emptiness, as they say. It's the terms they use. When we finally deconstruct phenomena to discover that there's not a single thing from the side of the phenomena that gives it that characteristic. What gives every phenomenon the characteristics, finally, is mind. So we all agree. So conventionally speaking, now, this is the point, microphone does exist. It does exist as a dependent arising. In other words, finally, the subtlest dependent arising is the mind. Our mind names it that. So things exist within that. Buddha, same. But instinctively, the grasping at self-existence wants something more. We want to reify it. We want something out there from its own side. We think that's not, if we think there's nothing out there from its own side, we become completely depressed and nihilistic. We want to go kill ourselves. That's the point Buddha's saying. These are the two extreme views that psychologically our mind goes between. So this is the one we're saying here is the middle way. It's a bit like Harry Potter's platform 9 3/4. It's infuriating. You're at 9, you go searching, and all you do is end up at 10. You go back again, and you end up at 9. You can't find platform 9 3/4. That's the middle way. That's when you realize, absolutely for sure, from the side of objects, there's nothing existing from its own side. But there is, in fact, a microphone. So Lama Tsongkhapa says a really marvelous method to help your mind, to trick your mind into getting the middle way, is every time you hear microphone is empty of existing from its own side, instead of instinctively chucking the baby out with the bathwater and heading off just instinctively to the wrong view of nihilism, we consciously say to ourselves, that means it's a dependent arising. And every time we hear, microphone is a dependent arising, it exists, instead of going to the wrong view of eternalism and clinging to it, we consciously say to ourselves, that means it is empty of existing from its own side. Because when, in fact, these seem now two stark contradictions. It's like it splits your brain in half. It's just infuriating. But in reality, they are saying the same thing. They're the flip sides of the coin. So we have to practice. When we hear emptiness, we hear dependent arising. When we hear dependent arising, we hear emptiness. And we just practice going there, trying to go towards platform 9 3/4. So ego grasping is this colloquial term for ignorance when it relates to how we cling to the self. Because this habit of seeing things as inherent, of the fundamentalist view of believing they're out there in themselves, that it's not a viewpoint of yours, that that's how it exists. Emotionally, how it functions is as fear. And this is where it's hard to see again. So when it comes to self, we're just clinging to this self-existent me the whole time. We only notice it when we get attacked or insulted or hurt. That's that so-called instinct for survival business. That's the name we've given to it, in the West. But that's the symptom of this ego grasping. And so fear is the bottom line of ego, of all delusions, of samsara. So if you even look at daily life, you have enough things and you're still dissatisfied. There's the anxiety of things going wrong, the anxiety that you're not right, the anxiety that... There's always anxiety. That's fear, isn't it? Anxiety is fear. And it just prevails. It's there all the time. People who really do lots of meditation, go off into the mountains and meditate. I remember... who begin to access their more refined level of mind. Who begin to access their refined level of mind. And simply speaking, when you can access your more subtle level of mind, what you're doing, remember, is necessarily going beyond, even temporarily, the conceptual and the sensory. So because the conceptual is caught up in the delusions, it lives in the delusions, then you're always living in fear and anxiety to some degree or another. It's all a question of degree. So when you begin even temporarily to touch your more refined level, subtle level of mind, what you do is temporarily cease the delusions, temporarily. So then you temporarily taste bliss, ecstasy, satisfaction, joy, happiness. All these words, absolutely real. Buddha is saying they are your natural state. And when you can learn to meditate and go beyond the gross level, you taste that. For a period, as long as you're in that state, And as long as you still got the delusions at your gross level, you cease those. And so what you experience is utter joy, no anxiety, no fear, freedom from those, because that's your natural state. So it's a very powerful kind of carrot. You know, even if you have a moment of pleasure in meditation, that's good because you can remind yourself that's who you really are. So you aim to get rid of the delusions, which is the method for getting there naturally and getting there to be there all the time. It's a natural psychological state. I remember Venerable Rene, who's this Swiss monk who lives at Vajrapani, who's been a professional meditator for 28 years or something, you know. I interviewed him 10 years ago, I think, in our magazine. And roughly speaking, and I'm paraphrasing, so, you know, he's probably made huge progress since then. They talk about the method for achieving single-pointed concentration. They refer to it, it's taught in 9 stages. We'll go through it maybe later. You know, very detailed, precise instructions of how to get to this very subtle level of mind where you can get single-pointed concentration. And so Rene said, maybe he touched on the 5th stage, just briefly. This is more than 10 years ago. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said there was no question. The bliss, I forget the words he used, that he experienced, the pleasure, the joy, fulfillment, happiness, whatever, was infinitely superior to any pleasure he had ever experienced through his senses. So this is all Buddha's saying, at using this model of the mind, gross, subtle, very subtle, that the normal daily life that we think is normal is actually living in a state of terror, is living in a state of gross suffering. But because it's all we know, of course you don't give it a name. But why we all have mental breakdowns, why we all have to go to the therapist and get our serotonin, you know, have depression and anxiety. We've got a good life. We've got nice children and husbands and houses and jobs. We're not living in a desert. We're not in Iraq, you know. So don't feel guilty about it. All you're proving is Buddha's point, that life is suffering, that mental suffering. I mean, Rinpoche, many of the prisoners we write to Rinpoche, and he often always says, you know, that your prison's nothing. And this is one of the first things he said to one of the very first prisoners that wrote to us. He said, and this guy's is this young Mexican ex-gangster. He's in a security housing unit up in Pelican Bay, where they're in their cells 23 hours a day. It's a model that's used commonly now from a lot of prisons in this country and around the world. Even when it was first built, it was sort of against human rights. It was considered against human rights because you're in your one little cell 23 hours a day with a bunk and 10 books, and that's about it, you know, and a pen and a pad. The inside of a pen. You can use the outside to stab your cellmate on the bunk above you. 8 foot by 10 foot. That's your life. So this young man who wrote to us when he was 18, he's still there now. He's in there for life as long as he doesn't snitch on the gangs. He's been practicing Buddhism and Christianity and different things for 10 years now. So anyway, when Rinpoche first wrote to him, I asked him to send him a 21st birthday card. And he wrote him 6 cards, actually, but, you know, birthday card. And what he said to him, and again I'm paraphrasing, is that, and there he is in this cell. I mean, it's called suffering as far as we're concerned, you know. And Rinpoche said, your prison's nothing in comparison with the inner prison of ordinary people. The prison of attachment, depression, pride, jealousy, anger. And this is the point that we prove in our middle class, you know, nice lives. We have all the things that are alleviating gross suffering, but we don't have the methods to alleviate the subtler suffering, the suffering of change, the suffering of the delusions, the suffering of attachment, dissatisfaction, depression, fear. Look at the fears of ordinary, nice, middle-class people, the minds. Look at the drug. I mean, the drugs aren't, you know, the drug companies aren't selling their drugs to poor people. They can't afford them. And they're all making billions. On what? Serotonin, sleeping pills, Prozac. What for? Depression, anxiety, fear. This is all Buddha's talking about, you know. That's it. The delusions. That's their nature. And the base, the root, is the primordial clinging to the self-existent me, which just in its nature is terror. So all we do is try to uphold that me. Terrified if people insult that me. We try to protect that me. We're attached to getting things for that me. And because all these are delusions, they're liars, then we're just digging a hole deeper every day by reinforcing them. This is what's hard to see, you know. And all we have to do is learn to think about it, listen to it, go off to meditate for 30 years and slowly start to see it for yourself. Okay? Meanwhile, we aim for that next life, and we try to do what we can in this life. So all Buddha's talking about is suffering at a subtler level. And so, of course, because we have got nice things and nice houses and nice this and nice that, we can happily spend our day busily filling up the gaping holes, can't we? And so when we finally can't is when we have to start listening to what's going on inside. So this is what happens to our friends in prison, you know. Their life as they knew it has been taken away. So they either go crazy It's a wake-up call. It's almost like a mantra. It's their wake-up call. That's why they all practice so well. There's nothing else that's pleasant in prison, believe me. The noise is disgusting. The food is revolting in most prisons. Just the people you're surrounded. It's like a nightmare being in prison. So you either go crazy or you start to develop yourself, because they've lost everything else. So as long as we have our nice house and our nice hubby and our nice this and our nice that, we're going to keep saying we're happy. So does that answer the question? Yeah? Food for thought? Okay. All right. Where were we at then in our little structure? We were talking about karma. We went through the 10 non-virtuous actions, didn't we? Oh yeah, I began on... That's right, I was starting to just... Oh, that's right, thank you very much. That's exactly right. We began talking about, that's right, the short session this afternoon, we began talking about the 4 opponent powers again, which is what we did last night, and we started looking at the relationship between each of those and one each of the 4 ways that karma ripens. That's right. So the first of the 4 opponent powers, regret, this very wholesome attitude that takes responsibility for the things that you've done that have harmed others because you do not want the future suffering, so you deeply regret them, so you can then start to purify. So this regret, yes, a very interesting one. Let's say, in general what regret is said to purify is the experiences similar to the cause. Let's say then, so the experience similar to the cause of killing is to be killed. So by you regretting your killing, you help purify your being killed, in other words. You clear? You got it? What that means? Not sure. Okay. Experience similar to the cause, that type of karma. What's that? Can you remember what that one is? The experience, there's 4 kinds of karma, right? Action similar to the cause is the tendency to do something. Experience, just hear the words. The experience similar to the cause. So then, if you get killed, what would you think the cause would be from your point of view? What would be the cause? If you get killed, what would be the cause in your past action? What would you have done? That's right. So the experience of being killed is similar to the cause, having killed. So the kind of karma is called experiences similar to the cause. You got me? So regretting killing, you're regretting, your killing, that purifies, certainly in the future, that kind of karma happening to you. Do you see? So this is what I'm saying then. In daily life, this is very tasty. We all can see. There's your perfect example. Okay, what's your name, darling? I forget. You. Annette, okay. There's Annette. This is a perfect example. Let's use Annette now, seeing as she stuck herself out here, so we'll use her as an example. So there's Annette. She's worked hard all day. She walks in the house, and then nobody's sharing the job of cleaning the house, so she feels resentful. It is. Resentful is for sure coming from anger, yeah. And it comes from... And so resentful is... How dare they not do this? Because what you're going to do is you're walking in the door, and this is where the delusions come. Your attachment wants it to be clean, doesn't it? So then because your attachment is thwarted, anger arises, and then you feel hurt and resentful, and that can be sort of probably, like it's not fair, they're doing this to me and all that kind of stuff as well, the self-pity as well. So the whole scenario there, isn't it? But the simple action of other people not cooperating with you is we can pin it down to this, couldn't we? So then the way you would use the 4 opponent powers for that particular one, you'd go in, you'd struggle with your mind, then you sit down, before you go to bed, you do your 4 opponent powers, and let's say you do your regret of the bad mouthing today and the anger and the this and the that, but what you could do very specifically, you could say, okay, I deeply regret my lack of cooperation with these people. Who knows what life in the past? Because we're talking past life here, especially. And even this life too. But you deeply regret, or even any, lack of cooperation when you haven't done the dishes and you left it to somebody else and you haven't taken care and you haven't really shared the jobs. We all know we even do that a bit in this life, right? But certainly in the past, you say, I deeply regret my ever having done that, because that's why I'm experiencing this. And that anyway is this is a very powerful method to help you bear it and deal with it. It reminds you of the karmic one, because we just instinctively, you see it out there as self-existent, not fair, poor me, and we just launch into that story, isn't it? But so this sitting and contemplating regret is very necessary every day, because it forces you to contemplate this business of karma. Because you tell yourself, well, look, I'm experiencing this. Guess why, honey child? Guess why, Robina? It's because you've done this in the past, and you're forcing yourself to come back to yourself rather than thinking they're doing this and you're thinking it's poor me, not fair, and you get all caught up in the self-pity, isn't it? But you're really analysing. Why is this happening? Using logic, you know. If you have the view of karma, you think, okay, this is logical. If I'm experiencing this right now, I'm experiencing it. There must be a cause for it. What's the cause? Well, Buddha says the main cause of everything is my past action. Well, what is something similar to this? Well, I mustn't have cooperated with other people in the past. So then you slowly help yourself own responsibility for this dirty house. Are you hearing me? It's really powerful for the mind, but this is the way you work with the concept of karma. It's not enough just to say, oh, it's my karma. You've got to analyse it, talk to yourself, be your own therapist, be logical. And then that helps you cut the self-pity. But guess what? If you really do, truly do regret that way you've behaved in the past, who knows, if you don't remember, it doesn't matter. And that helps you own this because you say, I really do regret this. What I'm saying is, don't be surprised. That is what helps the whole scenario change. Don't be surprised that tomorrow hubby will do the dishes. And I'm not joking. I've seen this again and again in my own life. Different times. I mean, I remember years ago, different dramas. I mean, one of the places I work, one of the Dharma centres, you know, and I got blamed for some things. Quite heavy, right? And it was so painful. And I really applied this one every day. I really applied it to stop the self-pity. You really talk yourself through, because the instinctive response now is the old delusions, and we're just brainwashed with those, and they're the voice we believe most loudly right now. You understand? And so what we're trying to do is shift that. We're trying to get a new view. So it's not enough to say, oh, it's karma. You've got to analyse it and go deep. So every day I would think about this. I'd say, okay, what is this thing that's happening? They're blaming me for something that I definitely didn't do. But logically, it must be I must have done it in the past because here I am experiencing it. In other words, if the fruit is there, you must have sown the seed. You can't avoid it. If the fish got killed, it has to have killed in the past. That's the irrefutable logic of karma. You've got to use that again and again, though, to argue. So I would say, okay, I must have done it. So then I'd say, and I regret, absolutely regret, and I was really specific about the people too. I regret the blaming I must have done to this person, that person, this person. And you know you can regret it because look at the suffering and you know it's painful, so you know you don't want the suffering. So I owned it. I owned it. I owned it. And I just am, and I've seen it many times, somehow without much effort, things kind of fell apart and changed. I mean, in a good way, it all kind of changed and it healed very quickly. The problem got solved. And I've seen it again and again. So I have confidence in this, you know. It's tough, but it's a very tasty way to help you grow up. Because, you see, right now, the spontaneous response, it's only spontaneous. Ego, poor me, not fair, anger, all the rest, because we've practiced that view to perfection. We've got it down. So we've got to practice a new view. And so you've got to speak the view to yourself. Are you hearing my point? And that's how you deconstruct the old one. And what it gives you is courage, inner strength. It helps you take responsibility. Because the virtuous approach, the karmic one, is a very brave, virtuous way to see things. So it gives you that courage and it counteracts the self-pity. Because if you walk in with that self-pity and resentment, you know, guaranteed, it causes the fights. And then that's how everything spirals down in families and companies and relationships. Because we're all coming from our own ego position. It's all instinctive. We've got it down. We believe it's true. And then we start fighting. Look at the world. Wars, dramas, violence. It's all because of this. This, in Buddha's terms, is the cause of all suffering. Not kidding. Comes down to the mind. Comes down to how we see things. Comes down to ego, self-pity. And ego is self-pity. Basically. Anger, jealousy, resentment are all self-pity. And that's the nature of ego grasping. It's like a little girl in there. See what I mean? So it's tough, but this is practice. And our real daily life experiences are the grist for the mill for that practice. So does that make sense, people? What I'm saying? How regret can purify the things that happen to you. And what I'm saying is a great way to take hold of that and not just make it theoretical is grab something in your own daily life and use that as your example. It's very beneficial, very helpful. So the next one, reliance, which is two parts, remember, refuge and compassion. My sense is it's mainly the compassion one here. I'm not really sure. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But this is said to purify environmental karma. So they have this nice saying. They say that the ground you fall down on is that hurts you, is the very ground you rely upon to stand up. So those sentient beings whom you have harmed and who have harmed you are those very beings you rely upon to generate compassion, to develop compassion, to help yourself change. So anyway, they talk about environmental karma. It's purified by that one. Then the third one, the remedy, the main one, doing the practice, that purifies the lower realms karmic result of the negative karma we create. So most of us as Buddhists, we tend to just to do that. We do our mind. I did my Vajrasattva mantras, we'll say. We've got to do the 4 steps. You've got to engage in the 4. They're crucial. They're huge. They're psychologically so unbelievably helpful. Regret, to really talk to yourself, really analyze, use karma as a basis. Think about it, break it down. Really is very powerful to help your mind and to help you get some self-respect. I regret because I don't want the future suffering, and you know that, it's true. And then the last one too, as Pabonka Rinpoche says, the most important, the determination to change. This is extremely important to engage in. That fisherman, basically, that story I told you about the fisherman. Actually, I didn't finish the story, did I? Let me tell you the story of the fisherman, the rest of the story. But my friend, her son, Salmon, he called himself Salmon. She said since the time he first saw the water, he ran like a magnet to the river. He even called himself Salmon, because of the habit in the past, wasn't it, of killing. So then the habit in the past, that drives you to do it again. And then remember what we described, the kind of the mechanism. The thing you've got the habit to do, you run like a magnet to it. And the thing you run like a magnet to is the thing that gives you pleasure. So for him it was fishing, it was killing fish. And because he got pleasure from it, he was blinded. He couldn't see the harm he was causing. His mother said she went fishing with him one time, and she said it was unbearable. Because she didn't have the karmic imprint to kill, therefore she could see nakedly what was happening. The fish were suffering. It was fairly evident to her eyes the fish were suffering, that they didn't like being in the boat. They were very distressed. It was called suffering, He's a really intelligent guy. He could never see it. That's how tragic delusions are. You're literally blind. It's like he could not see. What he saw was fish. He saw fish flapping because he had his own attachment and his own story in his mind. His own story was what he could see. And that's what Buddha says we're all doing. All we do is see our story when we see that person. We don't see the person at all. We don't see a microphone. We see our story. That's what delusions do. They make up their own story. They're a viewpoint. And when your viewpoint is very strong, very deluded, you literally can't see. He couldn't see the fish suffering. This is the tragedy for him. Forget the fish, even. So what happened was, he died, right? He drowned, scuba diving. This is the point about fishermen. They don't have aversion for those fish that they're killing. They love the fish. So that he kept going down back into the fish, Scuba diving. Well, he drowned scuba diving. So, of course, she, like most people, had this romantic notion that he died doing what he was doing. It was wonderful that he died down there, I bet it wasn't so wonderful. It would be terrifying to drown, wouldn't it? He's not sitting there thinking this is wonderful to die with the fish. He was probably terrified, like anybody dying. And maybe he got eaten by the fish. Who knows? They could never find him, I don't remember that part. I'm not sure if that's true. That part, but everything else is exactly correct. I met her 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I heard this story 10 years ago, and I've told it everywhere. And then I was in her part of California last year. I didn't know whether she was there or not. I didn't know she was there, but she was there, and I told the story. And then she said, Robina, I'm here. And I said, am I accurate in telling? She said, you're absolutely accurate. I told the story exactly right. So anyway, the point was she was in tears, right? I was at Courtin Monastery, and she was in tears, having heard Lama Zopa's Rinpoche's teachings about karma. And I just said to her, well, go and talk to Geshe Lama Kontrog, this amazing holy Lama who's a yogi, spent years up in the mountains meditating, And I'll talk about him. And because these people are said to be clairvoyant, have all these amazing qualities, So they very rarely tell you what they see. They give you some advice, So she went to see him and she explained what happened. She said his name and she wanted to know where he was now. And he said, yes. First he was born in the animal realm. Now he's in the hell realms. And what was interesting was, she kind of said, oh, what'll I do for him, you know? And he kind of laughed and said, what do you mean him? He said, everyone. And then when I said this to her, they very rarely tell, but I said this to the people in that. I said, I tell people that I think that was very powerful for your mind, because that's why you heard it. He wouldn't have told you otherwise. She really got something from that. She got some huge kind of, opened her mind from that, about the suffering of beings, you know. So it's an interesting story. I mean, take it or leave it, whatever, I'm just telling you. But the point is this. There he was, you see. The way karma works is like this. I've gone off a bit, the relationship of those four, but I'm coming to it. This is what, again, the way karma works. The fully ripened result of killing is to be born in the lower realms for many, many lives. But then eventually, like a gas tank, because everything is kind of a certain amount of energy you put in, and you get a certain amount of energy out of it. It runs out. The karma runs out. So all the time there he was, probably in the lower realms and the hell realms and the fish, and this is in the past lives, right? And then eventually that karma ran out, and like a miracle, he got the human life again. Some virtue ripened in whatever life, and then he got a really good human life, really good karma. Good person with good intelligence, plenty of experiences similar to the cause, are very good, a nice family, a beautiful environment, many good qualities. Look at us all, many good qualities, good people. Because it's so precise, we've got to look at the different qualities, not just paint one person, you know, like I said, by one quality they've got. You know, Hitler had good qualities. I'm quite sure he did. Osama bin Laden, we love to make him this kind of out there, self-existent monster. The pictures we even choose to have of him, you know. Even the commentary of all the reasonable, intelligent journalists, it's so emotional. I mean, from the point of view of being a Muslim, people who agree with him, he is their hero. You look at his life. He sacrificed his life for his people. His people, okay? Well, that's okay. Everybody sacrificed their life for their people. He's used all his money. He lives poor, he's sick, he walks around with, he's ill, you know. He might even be dead with his lungs or his liver or something. He's a really ill person. He sacrifices his life. Okay, unfortunately, it's to being a terrorist to harm other people. People called Americans, your people. So of course you don't like him. And I mean, the Palestinians, they always sound angry to the Israelis. But the Palestinians love hearing the Palestinians. The Israelis sound angry to the Palestinians, but the Israelis love hearing the Israelis. You look at them both, they look like the same. You can't even tell the difference. Depending on which view you've got, one appears like a monster and one appears like an angel. Well, they're both obviously extreme. If you're objective and you don't have much view either way, you can see they're pretty much saying the same thing. You can just interpose an Israeli name on the Palestinian story. It looks the same. They're both doing pretty much the same, but it all depends on your political view. Well, if you look really up, most things are like that, you know. You two people fighting. You love them both. You agree with them both. But they each see something utterly different, right? Again, this is how delusions work. So now I've lost my point. Where was I going? Okay, karma runs out. Yeah, okay. So, okay. So, there's this fisherman. He's got all these past lives. He had a certain amount of karma put in the tank. Killing karma. He had lower realms. Like a miracle, his virtuous karma ripened. He got a good human life, and he got a lot of good other karmic imprints along with that. A good person. But one of the tendencies he had was to kill. Now, for him, it didn't manifest. It didn't ripen as, say, some of my Mexican gangster friends, as killing other people. It didn't manifest as killing poodles, right? It didn't manifest as killing humans like poor old Mr. BTK did. It manifested for him as killing fish. Now, that happens to be something totally suitable in our society. We accept fishing. It's called a sport. Sons and fathers bond over their fishing. You know, it's seen as something marvellous because it's connected to the river and the sea and the sun and the water and nature. We call fishing a good thing. Well, take it from the perspective of the fish. You wouldn't call it a good thing. So you can sort of see how, again, it's a projection we have. But basically, from the Buddhist point of view, it's called killing sentient beings. And indeed, if you want to posit that a fish is a sentient being, then you have to agree that is what it's called. But because the world thinks it's okay, he never thought twice about it. His mummy was sad, but she couldn't start telling him not to fish, you know. It's not in a world where fishing is accepted. It's very difficult. You wouldn't go on about it, you know, you can't. I mean, I remember even on Fox television one time, one of the PETA people, you know those, what are those, PETA? People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, those people, right? They're finding evidence that fish suffer. Right? And so he's presenting his case, and the fox guy was just completely derisive, cynical, just kind of threw him off the program as being some idiot, you know. You mean to talk? He like laughed in his face. Like it seems so comical to think that fish have feelings. And of course that's the worldly view. We all know poodles have feelings because we're so attached to poodles. Remember the story in San Jose a few years ago? One road rage guy got out and he grabbed the poodle off the lady's front seat and chucked it on the freeway. I mean, he was practically put into death row for that. I mean, if it had been a rat, they would have all thanked him. He would have got a medal, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, so it shows how it's all to do with delusions. If you're attached to poodles, then it's terrible to kill poodles. Because we love dogs in this society and you don't eat them for your dinner, then it's shocking if we hear about the Filipinos eating their dogs. But I mean, for them it's just normal. You know, we kill chickens, they kill dogs. So you can really see how it's so arbitrary. It's so personal. It's based on delusions, you know. So Buddha's got this view that he says, well, all sentient beings all want to be happy and don't want to suffer. And indeed, some are harmful. They might be. That's true. Nevertheless, you know, there's just no reason to kill them just because you don't like them, because they harm you, you know. So whatever, you know. So there he is. He gets born with this tendency to kill, and for him it's killing fish. So also, of course, he becomes a successful fisherman. What does that mean? It means lots and lots of fish had the karma to be killed by him. If he didn't have the karma to kill any fish, he wouldn't have been a fisherman. He would have been a failure. Well, he would have felt sad, but you should rejoice for him. But you know, unfortunately, all the fish there ran with their mouths open, you know, to his hooks, ran into his nets. Karma takes care, you know, karmic connection. So because the world thinks it's good, and because he thought it was good, and it was peaceful, he loved the sea, would run like a magnet every day to his boat, you know, and he was successful, made money. He was generous with his fish. He wasn't a mean guy. So therefore, impossible for him to see that, in Buddhist terms anyway, that every single day he was fishing. He was continuing this deeply ingrained habit. He ran like a magnet to it, and he continued to create negative karma. But it was impossible to see it. He couldn't see it. It didn't feel bad, so he didn't call it bad, you know. So the Buddha would say this is the tragedy. With all of us in our daily actions, the way we do things, you know, our lying, our stealing, regular little things we do. Because no one notices we do it. We don't suddenly feel anything. No one hits us on the head. It's not like Pavlova's dog, you know. Pavlov's dog, whatever they call it. Pavlova's a Russian ballet dancer. And they make it, and there's an Australian dessert called pavlova, called after her. You know pavlova? You had a pavlova? It's meringue. Oh, it's delicious. It's very delicious. A special kind of dessert, Australian, called after this famous Russian ballet dancer.
Yeah, it is a dancer.
It is, that's right, exactly.
But Pavlov is
Pavlov's dog. I was saying Pavlova's dog. It's Pavlov's dog. That's right. That's that one. So we're not like, you know, kind of, we have this guilty thing. We kind of think if we do a bad thing, we're going to get punished. And then we wait for the punishment and nothing happens. Think, oh, good, we got away with it, you know. So it's like karma's like growing. You don't sow a seed and get a fruit right there. You wait. It comes slowly. Karma's like that. Same thing, evolutionary. So so there it is. So then what I'm getting at finally here now, in the purification process, you know, the fourth one, I jumped over no, I didn't jump, I'll come to the fourth one. The fourth one, which is the determination to change, as Pabonka Rinpoche says, is the most crucial one. So if this boy, let's say, had maybe, you know, there's not so much, maybe he'd met some Buddhists, maybe he has an attraction to Buddhists, and he heard about killing. Well, it might have stopped him in his tracks. He might have thought about it. Because lots of us who are Buddhists now killed in the past. Most of us killed something. Rats, roaches, you know. Some of us killed humans. Many people, you know, I mean, we've had abortions. You know, lots of these things. I mean, one has to look at it and don't feel fundamentalist about it. One thinks about it, you know, that's all. So maybe he might have heard that fishing was killing sentient beings, and he might have been able to think about the fish. Then he might have changed. Well, this is the miraculous one. This is the one, this is the most tragic one, that he didn't ever change. He saw it as good. He didn't see it as bad. He never thought about it, you know. Didn't come up. And so what happened was, that became the prevalent karma. That, because it was the strongest habit in his mind, overrode all his other goodness. Because it was the deepest habit, you know, the deepest habit. This was the one that ran the show. At the time of his death, of course, there he was. He didn't have a chance to die peacefully. Freaking out. He was drowning, for God's sake. So fear rises so strongly at the time of death, even when you don't drown, if you've never thought about impermanence. Fear rises naturally. That activates the main negative karmic seeds, because fear, ego-grasping fear, has this natural organic relationship with negative karma, with negative imprints, because they're all based on that. And then a happy mind, mind being peaceful, undiluted in other words. A happy mind is a peaceful mind. An unhappy mind is an unpeaceful mind because the delusions are there. A happy mind is a peaceful mind because the virtues are prevalent. So if you die with a happy mind, your mind virtuous, then that naturally activates a virtuous seed, which becomes the karma that they call it the throwing karma, that throws your consciousness into the next life. So for this lovely boy, this fisherman, good man, you know, the prevalent karma was the killing one. That was just activated easily by the fear that rose in his mind at the time of his death, that threw his consciousness on autopilot, that landed him into an animal birth and then eventually into the hell realms. So all that virtue wasted. It'll come again eventually, but what an enormous amount of suffering to experience before he can access those virtuous seeds again. So the crucial one in this life for us is to look into our minds, look into our actions, analyze them carefully, and make some new decisions, and try to change. This is where we practice. This is what really practice is. So often if we think of a happy life, we think of that young man, we would say he had a happy life. You know, he had a happy life, he did what he wanted, he had a good family, he had a lovely life. But the actions he did caused him to go to the lower realms. Whereas you could have a person who's in prison, some of our friends, who have a disgusting life. It's like a hell realm, those places. Some of them are so revolting. But he's working on his mind. He's working on his mind, you know. So which is a happy life? Which is better? Of course we crave the nice things now, that's all we care. But you know, one of our prisoners called Henry is a Mexican. He was probably in the mafia. You know, the Mexican mafia. Killed many people in his life, I'm quite sure. He's been practicing now for 10 years. And you read he's amazing. For 10 years. Never asked for anything. Very humble. Works really hard at his meditation every single day. Helps his friends all around, you know. He's got life. He's on the 3 strikes, you know. He won't get out of prison unless the laws in California change. And he's really making the most. Truly changing his mind. Becoming a marvellous, kind, compassionate, wise human being. Not trying to make him so special. But turning himself around, you know. So it looks like a garbage life he's got. But his life is preferable to the fisherman's because he's changing his mind. So, the relationship, so obviously the determination to change, this 4th one, the resolve, the determination to change, it's obvious what karma that purifies. It purifies the karma called action similar to the cause, which is the tendency to keep doing something. So he had that tendency to kill. He was on autopilot of killing, you know. So the determination to stop killing is obviously the one that purifies that. It goes without saying, you know. This is the most important one. This is why you've got to take it seriously, not just sort of be frantic and worried and anxious. Oh, I must not do that anymore. You really take stock. And if you can say for 5 minutes I won't be angry, for 1 hour I won't be angry, and you say it like really strongly, you really convincingly say to yourself, you mean it, then that's what you will do. Because your mind is powerful. You just have to have confidence in it. But we feel so hopeless and passive, you know. We wonder why we don't change. This step is one of the most important steps in our practice for how to change. You make the determination to change. It's huge. And it gives you such confidence. And you do it step by step, you know, very realistically, according to your capability. Because you're the boss, not Buddha. So the thing is, too, in Buddhism, it's interesting, we're going to talk more about, of course, about the compassion wing when we get to it. But karma, the more we use karma as our basis for understanding why things happen, instead of using it as a big stick, you use it as a basis for compassion. This is the point. When you understand karma, you begin to have compassion for yourself, so you want to change. And then you think of, say, the pilots. I mean, who wants to have compassion for those guys? Nobody. Why would you? They hurt my people, you know. So then to the extent to which they create harm is the extent to which you want to hate them, and we assume it's good to hate them. We just assume that's natural. The Palestinians hate the Israelis. The Israelis hate the Palestinians. I mean, it's just, you can see. We just think it's normal and good to hate the person who harms you. Well, the karmic view, once you establish that every single sentient being is experiencing the fruit of their past actions, then instantly that cuts anger. That cuts hate. Because you just have to think about it. Why are those pilots? Why do they do that action? They have this powerful karma with all those people. So that happened to them because of their past karma. And guess what they will experience in the future? Unbearable suffering. So so this kind of passion based on karma is like the mother for her precious kid, who's a junkie. Everybody else hates him. He's harmful, he lies, he steals. She has such compassion because she can see he is harming himself. And that's the basis of compassion for everybody. Once you see this, it's not difficult to have compassion. As long as you base your life on innocent victim, and you didn't ask to get born, it's not your fault, and these bad things happen to you unfairly, then it's very hard to have compassion for anybody. The only ones you're going to have compassion for are the people you agree with. But then to the extent you have compassion, if you're an Israeli, for Israelis, next instant you have anger towards the people who do it. So our compassion mostly just turns into anger. And we think that's kind of natural. But it's tragic. So you've got the karma is the basis. You just think that through and it stops you in your tracks. That's why those two young nuns that I mentioned, didn't I? Those two young nuns I mentioned in New York in 2003. I mentioned that, didn't I? Yeah, I did. They, these two young women, Richard Gere had, as I said, invited these Buddhists and a bunch of ex-prisoners, that's right, about 20 of them. He invited Dalai Lama to teach, and then there was this workshop thing happening with 20 ex-prisoners who also had worked with Buddhism or meditation during their incarceration. And they invited a couple of people like me as well. So it was just interesting to hear them all talk and hear their experiences and their struggles and their dramas and the racism and the sexism, and they're really struggling with their lives, And then these two young Tibetan women, early 20s, who'd been incarcerated in Tibet by the Chinese for just being Buddhists, for being nuns. And so they were very humble and very quiet, but when they talked about their experience of torture, they were tortured virtually every day, sexually abused virtually every day. But because for them, their response to walking in and seeing the dishes, because karma is in the bones of their being, like our view is in ours, so they wouldn't have to process it. They'd see the dishes and they'd laugh, because they'd immediately think, oh, karma, God, and they'd immediately own it. And then crack a joke, and then they'd do the dishes, or they'd say, come on, you guys, do the dishes. There wouldn't be resentment. If you're working with karma and you get to that point where you've really got it intuitively, and with them, they've just brought up with it. Do you see what I'm saying? Then that's why they don't have anger, not because they all just watch their breath the whole time. It's because they've got this philosophy in their mind that is such a different way of interpreting their experiences that it counteracts anger. There's no reason to be angry, because anger is a view that it shouldn't have happened. Anger is a view that it shouldn't have happened to me, that I'm an innocent victim. Anger is the view of the innocent victim. You see my point? When you analyse it carefully, you see this. So and we have to change. But anger, if you analyse the words of anger, how dare this happen? Why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening. Well, it's completely opposite to karma. Karma says, of course it should happen. In other words, it's your karmic appearance. Those dishes, immediately you'd see it as go, oh, there's all the lousy dishes that I never washed in the past. Look at this, and you'd crack a joke. Do you see what I'm saying? So for them, because that was internalised for them, the karma was their view. And they came with it, from probably being a Buddhist in the past, so they'd really practiced it. So then, during this experience of being tortured, not just dirty dishes, torture, sexual abuse, every day. Of course, extremely painful, but because they are practicing, really trying to practice, then this is in the forefront of their mind every day. This is the tool they're using. And so inevitably, it would give them incredible strength to bear it. Because what makes us crazy and go mad is we don't know why it's happening. We don't have a reason, even why there are dirty dishes. We just think it's not fair. So then you go mad, especially if it's torture. You go mad. Because mainly the madness is coming from the mental suffering, the freaking out, the fear, the panic, But if you have such a different view, such a different way of interpreting this experience, then you don't go mad. So those nuns, what was clear to everybody, they weren't, they weren't crazy. They weren't angry. They weren't depressed. And they even expressed, but very humbly, that they had compassion for these torturers. Because obviously we realise we've harmed them in the past, they said. So you could see, they were the expression of this philosophy of karma. It's not just some empty words. It has deep experiential implications. It fundamentally changes the way you experience your life. It's like that, actually. It's a very interesting viewpoint. But it has, as I said, it's experiential. If you really use it properly. If you just say the words, oh, it's karma, and don't go further, then you just go back to the default mode of ego's view, then nothing changes. You've got to deconstruct and think it deeply and go through it, you know. Then, experientially, emotionally, you begin to change. This is the point. Be your own therapist, in other words. But all the delusions, they're the voice of the innocent victim. That's why Lama Yeshe would kind of joke and say ego is like self-pity me. It's really true. You look, I mean, you know, a person, you look at a person who's really angry. You just watch the body language, watch the behavior, watch the face. There's a little child there. Okay, anger is very harmful. Doesn't mean it's not harmful. But there's a little child there. Hurt. A hurt little child. Look at pride. Talk about child. How dare they do that to me? You know, they don't. It's like pride is this little baby in there who desperately wants to be approved of and seen, and is devastated when you're not. It's a little child. Look at depression. It's self-pity. I'm not being mean about any of us. Please, we've all got them. Anger, attachment, jealousy. They're all, as soon as they arise, our sense of self kind of just contracts and becomes a pinhead big, but it becomes as big as Mount Everest at the same time. It dominates the world. All the delusions, if you listen to them carefully, if you watch yourself, if you watch your emotions, if you listen to the voice behind the feeling, the words, you're going to see the child. It's a child, a hurt child. And it's self-pity. It's poor me. They're all poor me, you know. Ego's not big and strong. Ego's like a child, but a very destructive child. Look at the harm the world does, you know. And what's so interesting when you observe virtuous, positive states of mind, which are necessarily not disturbing and not delusional. When they are more prevalent, then you're immediately more expansive. You know, if you walk in the kitchen one day and you're just feeling quite kind, you know, and you just see the dishes, oh, the poor guys, they're probably forgotten. And you love them immediately. Your heart's open. Your heart's open. You say, hi, sweetie, how are you? You forget all about it. But if your mind's hurt and resentful, then you're closed, don't you? And you're tight, and you're separate from the people, and you see them as bad. But the other one, if your mind's open and kind, so maybe one day it won't matter to you. Hi, sweetie, how are you? And everything's fine, you know. I mean, it still doesn't mean you shouldn't sit down and get them to do their job. That's for their sake. We're talking about ego now. For their sake, it might be good to get them to do it. And often that's what I'm meaning when I said false compassion, which is often what the mother does. She takes the responsibility away from them and she says, oh, I'll do it myself. And in fact, it's not good for them. You understand my point? But what I'm getting at here is that the virtuous states of mind, they're necessarily spacious. You're necessarily a sense of connectedness with others. The negative states of mind, you're necessarily cut off from others. Others appear either divine and gorgeous and you've got to go get them, or they appear like monsters and you've got to punch them, you see. There's always a sense of separateness, of being isolated, lonely, bereft, cut off. You look at all the delusions, lonely, angry, hurt, poor me, resentful, depressed, anxious, worried. It's kind of constricted and small and miserable. You can't see past your own nose. Then look at the virtues. When there's a sense of well-being, you see other people, even strangers, you feel connected. You know, there's a sense of openness, connectedness. It's we. That's the virtues. So all we're trying to do is develop that part of ourselves. And that's our natural part, Buddha says. There's other parts just rubbish. Get rid of it. So, food for thought. Got to be brave. And that's why the first step, first stage of practice, junior school, first scope, you've got to look into yourself and see your own suffering. First and second scopes. It's about you. And don't think of it as selfish. We don't do that now. With all our self-centeredness and our misery and our hurt and our anger and jealousy, we're caught up with ourselves, it's true, but in a neurotic sense. We've got to start looking into ourselves kindly. Because the irony of all the delusions is that you don't like yourself. You know, my mother used to say it all the time. You're your own worst enemy, she'd say. So true. So we've got to start to look at ourselves in a kind way. It's like welcoming in an enemy and start talking and being kind and listening with yourself. You've got to listen. And you've got to learn to see how your anger and your hurt and your depression and your paranoia and your jealousy and your lust, you know, your uncontrolled mind hurts you. Not just the usual default guilt mode. Oh, I shouldn't be this, we think. And we try to push it all away. That's not helpful. You've got to look at it kindly. And you've got to learn to see how this stuff is what causes you suffering. And how finally you're exhausted by the suffering. You're fed up with it. So it's kindness that you do it with, but it's clear and strong and brave, you know. Because when you really can see how these states of mind harm you, then you know you have no choice but to change. And it's not scary. As long as we keep thinking, this is who I really am, and what we do is we reinforce those negative qualities, and then we feel guilty about it, and that reinforces it, because that's the fundamentalist view, the concrete one, the stuck one, the small one, the harsh one, the negative one. That reinforces it, that deepens it. So it's sort of like you've got to welcome your delusions. You've got to welcome them. And not be angry with yourself. You've got to be kind to yourself. And then you've got to see how they're horrible. You know, you've got to see how they're horrible, how they're harming you. But you don't hate yourself for it. You be very precise. You know, when you've got like some ugly part, you know, like an ugly growth on your arm, if you you identify the whole of yourself by that. I am so ugly. Well, excuse me, it's not true. It's just your arm. Don't exaggerate. And then secondly, because we see it as inherent and then permanent, we think it'll never change. So all we want to do is make it go away. All we want to do is hide it, isn't it? But once you realize it's not permanent, it isn't really you, it is part of you, but it's not the total you, and it's impermanent, you can change it. Suddenly you're brave enough now to look into it and investigate it. Because now you're excited because you know you can change it. That's what we have to do with this. Not just beat ourselves up, you know, be negative. Be happy to see the problems and investigate them like you must to understand this so you know how to change it. Just like when you look under the hood of your car, you're looking for the problem. You don't kick the car when you find the problem, you cheer. Now I found the problem. And you're so excited because now you can fix it. That's the attitude we must have for ourselves. But because we're totally brainwashed with the view, which is the materialistic, you know, view, and it's the view of self-grasping, that this is who I am, and anyway as well, I didn't ask to get born, did I? It's not my fault. They made me this way. Then of course you don't think you can change it. So of course you don't want to look at it. So you blame and feel guilty. We just reinforce it. But it's not permanent. It is not the total you. It does not define you. But it is real and it is disgusting. So you want to change it. But with a happy mind. So you welcome your anger, your disgusting delusions. You're lying, you're this, you're that. You welcome them. You look at them. You see how they cause you suffering. And with respect for yourself, you make this decision to change them. Not out of guilt and shame. That's just, again, fundamentalism, you know. That's how we think of religion. You're a bad person. This is when we don't look at our minds. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but what was that guy recently, that big famous Christian? And he got caught with the boy prostitutes. I mean, you've got to, I mean, I don't know the man at all. But my feeling is that's the kind of thing that happens if you don't look at your mind. If you just say words, but don't look at yourself, then you bury it, and then you have so much fear of it that it all pops out, you know, and then he was often going, and he couldn't deal with it. It was just so unbearable. That's because you don't look at your mind. And this is normal human behaviour, you know. We think it's sort of strange, but it's normal human behaviour. If you don't ever look in here, then of course you're going to be doing wacko, weird things that you you say one thing and do another. You're living in a schizophrenic world, you know. We've got to look at our mind and own everything that's in there, warts and all, and be happy to see it. But you don't identify with it. You identify with your potential. then you're happy to find the problems when you identify with your potential, your Buddha nature, your purity, your goodness. Then you're courageous. Then you can change easily. Then it's not a problem. But that takes time. It takes a lot of courage. Because we are addicted to disliking ourselves. We're addicted to putting ourselves down. We're addicted to being a policeman, to ourselves. Thinking that's virtuous. It's not. It's stupidity. We've got to become our own best friends. Then we can be friends to others. You can't ever help another person if you can't help yourself. You can't possibly help another person if you don't understand your own mind, your own suffering. So we've got to have the humility to look at ourselves, and then to be glad that we're seeing it, and then have the courage to change. So, trying to think differently, in other words, that's all we're trying to do, is think differently. Change the mind. That's it. That's the job. So let's think differently about our dinner. Okay, instead of seeing it with attachment and just rushing and sticking it in the mouth without a second thought, we just now think it's actually empty. It has no inherent nature. It does not exist like that. We've labelled it this. We're so used to seeing it this way, believe it's true now. But it has no inherent nature. It's a dependent arising. All the people who've made it, all the different things. So it's empty. So because it's empty, we can manifest it now in the sky. We think of it as oceans of nectar. We bless it with Om Ahung, Om Ahung, Om Ahung. So now it transforms into oceans of nectar. Like the loaves and fishes, it multiplies. And now we think the most crucial one, as Rinpoche says, is to offer it. So we just imagine, just use your creative imagination. Instead of just using your creative imagination for your own self all day and night, your bad qualities or your lusts, thinking of all the lovely things you want, we can do that very well. We've got a very good creative imagination. Here we use it to be virtuous. Boring in the beginning, but we can get used to it. We think of all the Buddhas, all the holy beings, all the bodhisattvas. Just imagine them all. Then we think of all the suffering sentient beings, all the gods and humans and animals and predators and hell beings. Pervading space, we imagine them all. And we imagine them all experiencing the pleasure of this food that we offer them so happily. And we imagine all their suffering goes, all their happiness comes. Just to think this. Just think this. It's unbelievable to just think it. You just put those seeds in your mind. How marvelous, think. Lama Sangye, Lama Che, Dejin Lama Gedante, Kungi Jepo Lama Te, Lama Namla, Che Pabul. And then as Lama Zopa says, once you've blessed the food and offered it, the bigger your stomach, the better. So please enjoy. And then we dedicate, thinking these seeds we planted this last 2 hours, all got in. May we nourish them with our virtue, develop our qualities, benefit others, no matter how long it takes. Changchub sem chogrin poche ma ke panam ke gyuchig ke panyam pa me payang gong ne gong du belba sho. Okay. So what meditation did you do this morning? What did you do? Do you remember? Anybody? Who was here for the meditation? Shakyamuni Buddha again. Okay. Well, I keep forgetting to go. We're going to go through this other Chenrezig one. We haven't done that yet, and I keep meaning to go through, but we won't. We'll do that soon. Coming. We'll do that. It'll come. Okay.